Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 19th Roundtable discussion produced by Transparent Media Truth. This episode was recorded on September 28th, 2020. In this episode, we revisit the devastating effects the opioid crisis is having on the pain management community. While we often hear of the rising tide of heroin abuse across the country and the pill mills that feed it, we are much less exposed to the blowback the drug war causes to those legitimately suffering from chronic pain, in need of medically prescribed opiates for pain management that allows them to lead functional lives. Not only does the DEA intervene in the doctor-patient relationship if prescriptions are deemed too high dose, but there is a concerted and corrupt effort to treat long-term pain sufferers as addicts, force tapering many into withdrawal while pushing lucrative rehabilitation drugs like methadone and Suboxone. Today, we are joined by Jonelle Elgaway, host of Conspiracies Against Wellness and The Doctor's Corner on YouTube, as well as Claudia Merandi, a patient advocate and organizer of the Don't Punish Pain rallies. More information about Claudia can be found at www.don'tpunishpainrally.com. The two doctors on our panel today include Dr. Arnold Feldman, a retired anesthesiologist with first-hand knowledge of the over-policing of pain management doctors, as well as Dr. Thomas Klein, who has been treating pain patients since 2009 and is now helping to organize the National Pain Council to bring awareness of the issue to government regulators and legislators in Washington, D.C. If you are interested in learning more or are interested in making a donation, you can email patientsunite14@gmail.com. Thanks, as always, to producer Rob Rubin of Transparent Media Truth for putting all of us together. Find out more about TMT and all the roundtable discussions at the Transparent Media Truth YouTube channel or www.transparentmediatruth.com on the web. Rob is on Twitter at TransparentMed1. I am the host and editor for the program. My name is Doug McKenty. You can catch my show, The Shift with Doug McKenty, on Facebook and YouTube or on the web at www.theshiftnow.com. I'm also on Twitter at DMcKenty. Wherever and however you are listening, please like, subscribe, or share this information with others. You are the primary distributors of this podcast. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and I'm happy to introduce Jonelle Elgaway, Claudia Merandi, and Drs. Arnold Feldman and Thomas Klein to this edition of the Roundtable Discussions. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 19th Roundtable discussion produced by Transparent Media Truth. Today, we're having our second episode about the tapers crisis. It's something that is almost completely not covered by the mainstream media, but yet it's a big issue for tens of millions of people in the United States. And so we're happy to have this conversation today to try to educate people about what's going on. It seems a lot of people, for those of you that don't know about this, a lot of people are getting sort of hoovered up into the drug war who are legitimate pain patients, and it's becoming more and more difficult for people to get the pain medications that they need as the system tries to crack down on doctors, of course, giving out pain medication to people who are not in need and trying to use these drugs recreationally. But we desperately need to come to some kind of a policy here where people who actually need it can get the drugs that they need in order to live pain-free and functional existences. So I'm joined today by Jonelle Elgaway, Dr. Thomas Klein, Claudia Merandi, and Dr. Arnold Feldman. They're all professionals in this field, or either medical professionals or pain patients in need, and are all struggling with this issue. So I'm going to hand this off to Jonelle to get us started here, and maybe if we could just go around the table and explain a little bit about our relationship to the issue and give an overall perspective about what's going on. So Jonelle, you want to kick it in?
Sure. Thank you so much, Doug, Rob, and Transparent Media Truth for giving us this platform. Today we're going to just talk about The AMA recently reported that there was 37% decrease in opioid prescribing from 2014 to 2019. And amid an ongoing drug overdose crisis, the goal was to reduce the harms associated with opioid pain medications. But there is no justification for forced tapers of patients dealing with rare, painful, and incurable diseases and cancer patients. Yet here we are. So before we go into this, Ms. Claudia Merandi, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing. I'm the founder of the Don't Punish Pain Rally organization and also the Doctor Patient Forum. I organize rallies every few months for pain patients who have been affected by the horrific 2016 CDC guidelines. And myself and Dr. Feldman, we have a nonprofit, the Doctor Patient Forum, where we are called in to advocate for patients who have been affected. And we rally again October 7th. So check don'tpunishpainrally.com to find a rally nearby.
Dr. Feldman, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I happen to be I'm not sure I like the word pain physician, but a physician that treated chronic painful illnesses and acute painful illnesses for 40 years, if you can believe that. I graduated medical school in 1980. It became immediately apparent to me that a needed specialty. Before the specialty of pain management existed, I was treating pain patients as an anesthesiologist. I have been through the dark years, which we are in now, the dark ages of pain medicine. I have been through the golden years, which were really not so golden, in the 90s and early 2000s, and I was in what I would call the transformative years, which was the mid to late 80s, where people were just becoming aware that we're not doing a greatest job in America in treating chronic painful illnesses, actually throughout the civilized and uncivilized world. So I've been from home plate to first base and back again a couple of times, and forward and reverse. And now I am, because of circumstances which we can all discuss later, we are now all targets. I feel like we are all targets, and it's time for us to get into the war, and that's why I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Feldman. Dr. Thomas Klein, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm basically a primary care physician with an interest over the past 4 years in people with rare, painful diseases. There's lots of rare diseases, not all of them are painful, and chronic painful diseases. And I have had a practice with 34 people, all of whom have severe diseases, none of whom received therapy or treatment from any physician. To get into my practice, you had to be denied by at least 5 to 10 physicians. The rare painful diseases is an interesting group. We know from the government there's 10 million people taking opiates every single day. That's 3% of the population. So here in North Carolina, that's 300,000 people. Nobody's ever asked who they are. Dr. Doyle, who's the chief medical officer for the CDC branch in charge of this stuff, when she was on a YouTube video, she says, these are people with low back pain and hip pain. It's obvious she's never been outside the building there in Atlanta, because these are people with serious rare painful diseases. And that's my specialty. People in pain, I give them pain medicine. And if it works, I continue. If it doesn't work, we stop. It's kind of simple. It's like any other medicine we prescribe. But somehow this medicine has become demonized. So we'll talk about that a little bit. I do have the AMA corrections here that we can talk about later for the CDC.
Thank you, Dr. Klein. And I'll just share a little bit about myself. I've been a 27-year patient dealing with rare and painful diseases. When I started advocating in 2016, I started a a network. It was called 360 Network, and it had several shows. Claudia had a show. Dr. Klein and I had one, and there was a few others. Actually, we are about to start the Doctor's Corner back up again. I'm hoping in mid to late October. So please watch out for that. But I'm just here fighting the good fight and working with whoever I can to try and make sure that patients and doctors are protected, especially during this horrible time. So let's jump right into what the main topic, and that's tapering and forced tapering. I mean, are there any benefits for patients to be tapered or forced tapered off pain medications? Who would like to take that?
Jonelle, can I butt in for just a second and
Sure.
ask that you really describe what tapering is? Because Rob mentioned it to me initially, and I didn't understand. This is when people are on a certain amount of pain medication, and then you're trying to kind of wean yourself off of it, or you're being forced to take a half dose or something like that. Can you just provide an overview so people understand that concept
actually,
of tapering?
Dr. Thomas Klein would probably be best at explaining tapers, if you don't mind.
Yeah, if I fell in love with the CDC unauthorized guidelines, what I would do, they said that there's a 90 milligram maximum that was made up. And when they submitted that to the FDA said, oh my God, no, we're not going to do that. They published it anyway. And now in 4 years, we've ruined the lives of several million people.
Mm-hmm.
So here's
is very low. Is that what you're saying?
So here's the way it works. So you've had this terrible, awful disease, and your life has been restored, and you're taking medicine every day, and it's working great. But when we add up the numbers, it's more than 90.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm the big believer in the CDC. Say, well, Jonelle, I know it's working real well, but I'm just going to give you half. Right. Because the CDC told me to, and if I don't do it, the DEA is going to come and arrest me, or they'll take my medical license. So we have to do it. Sorry, here's a prescription for half as much. So you just go home and deal with it. And I'll see you next month, and we're going to cut it down even more. It's interesting that 90 milligrams is a dose you would give a large dog.
Mm-hmm.
It is a dose you would give a 10-year-old. So where did this come from? Who made up this 90 milligram cutoff? The FDA says you can give as much as you want. My medical board says you can give as much as you want here in North Carolina. There's no limit. You just give it until it works. It's like insulin. There's no maximum on insulin. You just give it until it works. So
and people develop tolerance, right? So over time, they're likely to need a bit more, and it's up to your relationship with your doctor and your individual situation in order to discover, what the amount that works for you is.
That's correct. We just go ahead,
Well, it really depends on the patient. I mean, for example, myself, I don't take the same amount of pain medications every day. So my level of what MMEs, morphine milligram equivalents that I take daily, I haven't had to really go up once I found my level of what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm able to stay there. But I mean, sometimes you could also switch to a different medication, which will help as well. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
If I could chime in,
yeah.
I look at it two ways. The first thing you have to consider with any medication, not necessarily opiates, any medication you can prescribe or that is prescribable, you have to, as the physician, the patient too, to a certain degree, measure risk-benefit ratio. What's the risk of putting this substance into your body, either by pill, by shot, by cream, whatever you use, and what is the benefit that you derive from this? Okay, that is with insulin, with antibiotics, with seizure medications, benzodiazepines, opiates, aspirin, cardia, anything. Okay, so I'll only speak for myself. When I prescribed opiates, I had to be cognizant of two things. Obviously, risk-benefit ratio, and also men and women with blue jackets with yellow letters on them called DEA agents, right? And then the DEA agents have deputized a number of agencies to do their bidding, and those agencies are, number one, the state medical boards. Number two, somehow or other, they conscripted the DEA, the CDC into this. So as the physician, so we go back to the physician's office. So the physician, you should always measure risk benefit, but then you have to add this third thing, which is your own personal survival, right? A good physician should always measure risk benefit. So in other words, if it's more risky for Mary Jo to take 120 milligrams of morphine than 90, you might suggest to Mary Jo, let's slowly decrease this to 90 and see what happens, is, without shocking Mary Jo going from 120 to 0. But when you have a DEA agent visit you, you say, I'm getting everybody less than 90. And a lot of doctors are saying, I'm not going to prescribe any more at all. So it's like this. You have a gun to your head, you're going to make a certain decision, you're going to make it faster. And the question is the CDC guideline a guideline? Well, they would say it's only a guideline. But I would say, no, it is a weapon. It's been weaponized. And so there's no reasonable choice for a practicing physician anymore. So, meaning you can't ignore the DEA, which used to be rare to see a doctor prosecuted. It's not so rare anymore. Well, so that's how you have to look at this.
And these guidelines, you're right, they are being weaponized. What's crazy, though, is they're supposed to be just that, guidelines. Like, hey, this is a suggestion of what you should maybe be doing. But yet, why would somebody like myself have to go and get a bill sponsored against a guideline if it's not a law? So I feel like the government is using these guidelines instead of creating them into laws, and just essentially that they become laws then.
Well, just before we got on this telephone conversation, I was on the phone with a former Louisiana state senator who's a lawyer, and he was screaming at me saying, you need to do this, and you need to do that, and you need to do this. Well, number one, what he doesn't understand is the things he was telling me, basically, hire a lawyer to sue all these people. Well, you and I know that costs a lot of money. Number two is, what forum are you going to do these things in? Are you going to sue them in the state of Louisiana, North Carolina, Dr. Klein, Rhode Island? And are we going to spend the rest of our lives in court, which we can? These things, the legal system is slow. So essentially, the forced tapering of individuals, in my opinion, has to be handled in, number one, by the legislature, number two, by the court of public opinion, which they are intimately joined, meaning voters is what makes these, and money is what makes these legislators move. The court system is there for us, but it has to be a three-pronged approach.
So let me ask, are there benefits to taper a patient or force taper a patient? And what are those? And is it ethical?
Well, I'll just tell you and then I'll shut up. If the patient is at risk for serious side effects, of course there's a benefit to taper the medication, but that goes back to the very simple tenets of pharmacologic use of medications, is measure the risk and the benefit. That's between the doctor and the patient, usually, or it used to be. Number two, if I was practicing today, I probably would tell a patient, look, we're going to get you down to 90 morphine milliequivalents because you have to make a choice. Do you want me to survive as your doctor, or because you have a difficult time finding anyone? Those are not two great choices to make, but I think that's where we are.
Dr. Klein, did you want to say something?
You ever hear of the garbage scow story?
No.
No. In New York, this man had a towing business, and he towed garbage out of New York City, and he was on his way down to Wilmington, North Carolina, where he was going to dump it by contract. Somebody ran out and said, hey, you got medical waste on there. They saw some bed pans, right? Some reporter from North Carolina. So they refused. So he gets his tug and he hauls his boat down to Florida. And they said, we heard you had medical waste on there. We're not taking it. So then he takes it to Louisiana. Then he took it down to Belize and he finally hauls it back. And they finally put some inspectors on there. And guess what? No medical waste. So what's happened is the word opioid is always used by itself. You never read opioid pain medicine. So you can create the illusion of evil by just using the word opioid. So the big question is, if the DEA is going to come prancing into your office, what is the government afraid of? The DEA, by the way, are the police. They don't operate on their own any more than our police here in Raleigh operate on their own. They work for the city. DEA works for Department of Justice. They are the enforcement wing of the Department of Justice. So the Department of Justice gets its marching orders from the Attorney General, who gets his marching orders from the President of the United States. So the President of the United States said doctors are handing out this stuff and they are causing problems. It's causing overdose deaths and addiction. Medical waste on the garbage scow. That's not true. But if you try to tell people it's not true, they don't like that because people don't like to be it's not true because they've believed it. So we have believed this since 1900. It goes way, way back. Our first legislation was in 1909, and then in 1915 with the Harrison Act. And then all along the way, we have had this in our fabric for a long time, that these are dangerous drugs. So if we sat down with the Attorney General and said, what are you afraid of? Well, I don't think they would know what to say.
Can I just interject really quickly? Because what comes to my mind is, I mean, people obviously are worried about addiction. So when you're putting someone on a pain medication like this, do you have some percentage of patients that just want more? You know, I mean, you're going to run into this addiction.
Gee, doc, I love this stuff. Can I have some more?
Yeah, right. So you know, and theoretically, at least, that's what the government is trying to deal
Well,
with.
they need to look at their own figures. The government agency, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Agency, only in the United States we have a giant agency called Substance Abuse Agency. Their numbers are about 800,000 heroin addicts. That seems like a lot of people, you know, worth preventing. But when you divide it by the population of 325 million, it only turns out to be 4 people per 1,000. So that kind of surprised me when I first looked at it. I thought, you know, I kind of thought there'd be a lot more. So it must be increasing because we're just prescribing so many opiates. Then I was doing some historical research in 1920, 200,000 addicts, heroin addicts, divided by the population in 1920, 4 people per 1,000. So the number of addicts has not changed. So for an epidemiologist, or a microbe hunter, we call them, the only assumption you can make is this has got to be a genetic disease. Wow, it's real simple. You can't have a steady, every year prevalence of a disease through environment. If you plot the number of people with cocaine addiction, it bounces all around. See, it has to do with the substance. Heroin addiction, if you talk to heroin addicts, you know how long it takes them to get addicted? First pill.
Yeah.
First pill. So wait a minute. See, the assumption is the longer you take this stuff, or the higher the dose you take. No. If you talk to people that got addicted, they got addicted on one teeny weeny Vicodin tablet. So, and then you look at the brain researchers and it's pretty clear and they kind of know what it is. And very soon there's going to be a genetic test for addiction. It's taken a long time to develop because the number of abnormalities is high. It's technically difficult. And then we're going to be able to test people and say, you do not have the genes, therefore you're not going to become addicted.
Well, and also the number of addiction has not gone up in 100 years, you said, Dr. Klein?
Well, at least 100 years.
Yeah.
1920. So if it's the same all the time, so then I read the other day that and there was, I don't know, billions of addicts, and then you divide it by the world population, and guess what it came out to be? Almost fell over 4 people per thousand. Mexico City, go ahead, Joelle.
No, what's so crazy though is, okay, so we have what, maybe 2 million addicts in the United States around there?
One, yeah.
Okay, 1 million. But yet, how much money are we throwing towards addiction?
Well, wait, here, I just wrote a little tweet today. I said, if you want to stop deaths on the streets and you want to stop arrests of doctors and you want to stop taking medicines away from people, all you have to do is, instead of treating 20% of people with addiction disease, you treat 100%. That's what they did in Switzerland and Portugal, and they just claim there's no more crime, and there's no more rationing of medicines. I mean, you know, if I write a prescription for 300 oxycodone, and by the way, oxycodone has to be given every 4 hours. That's why there's so many pills. No other medicine that I can think of, we prescribe every 4 hours, you know? So anyway, you need a lot. So I could give a prescription to somebody for 300 pills, and the street value of 300 pills is $9,000. Now, you could come to me once a month with your fake x-rays and fool me, and so I just give you your monthly stuff, and, you know, we don't have x-ray vision. You can't see back pain. And all the studies, we frequently don't show it. So you get $9,000 times 12. What's that? That could be your annual income just going to the doctor once a month.
Right.
So the power of how much money it's worth. But the key thing is, see, if Jonelle goes to the doctor's office and says, you know, I've got this chronic painful condition, and he says, oh, God, you're going to get addicted. All she has to say is, I've already been on these and I did not get addicted. So as soon as you take one pill or a few and you don't fly off to the moon, you will never, ever become addicted. Now, that's a simple fact, but nobody wants to believe it because it's an inconvenient truth. All the people in pain clinics are already on their medicines, and if they're not currently addicted, and you know what? Addicted people don't go to pain clinics or pharmacies or doctors. Then all of the people in these pain clinics will never become addicted. Now, I wrote that in a tweet, and my medical board didn't like it. And they're in the process of doing some very nasty things to me because they're afraid of the stuff. If it'd be nice if you could sit down with people and say, what are you afraid of? And I use the Socratic method, which is a pain in the ass. Which is to continue to ask questions, and people really hate that. So I had this young woman the other day on the phone, and she was writing an article, and so she agreed to do it. And so she has a brother who's an addict, and so I said, okay, what are you afraid of? And what it boiled down to was people are afraid of unpredictable behavior, and they think that people with addiction disease are unpredictable, and that's because they're real sneaky. And they're real sneaky because they're really not criminals. They don't go with guns and hold up places, beat up people. What they do is they steal from, you know, a sister, or they'll go through your medicine cabinet, or, you know, they'll take things back to the store, you know, or they'll steal, they'll shoplift and then take them back and get the money. It's really kind of sad. I mean, there's 10 million people doing this, and what do we think? They all have bad behaviors. They've got, you know, they've made poor choices. Oh, that was one of her answers that her family came up with. They felt like the brother had poor choices.
Well, you know, you made a comment that there's a genetic predisposition towards addiction, and I believe that as well. But here's where I believe the problem. This is what my belief is, and I think, you know, most of you will agree, at least partially. A very small group of people got together at some point or points in time, and this probably started around 2010, 2012. You always had the DEA. They've been around since 1973 and since the Harrison Narcotic Act, but doctors were generally not their major targets. But then you had a small group of people, and Andrew Kolodny was their fearless leader, former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, and they got together and this is what I believe happened. They saw the meteoric rise in revenues of the Purdue company, which was owned, completely. It was not a public company, by the Sackler family. 3 guys. And they made $20 billion on the production, sale, and education of physicians about the treatment of pain. And these guys got in league with the makers of Suboxone. And they said, we want that money. At the same time, there was this rise of the abuse of medications, not because the medications caused abuse, is because the addicts saw that there was a change in attitude of the prescribers. And so essentially what we have witnessed is the taking of $20 billion or more, and we're going to take it from here and we're going to put it over here, and we don't really care what happens to the 10, 20, 30 million people with chronic pain or their physicians, as long as we get the money. Claudia, do you agree with that?
Not only do I agree with it, but most about this whole opioid crisis, and I'm very vocal about it, is the dishonesty from doctors. You have Andrew Kolodny, Anna Lemke, and everybody who sits on the board of Prop. They're all lining their pockets with gold. They're profiting off the crisis they created. And the dishonesty, it's mind-boggling to me. So that,
it's not just a matter of, do these drugs cause harm? I have been a pain practitioner for almost 4 decades. And, I never had one patient overdose on opiates. Never. Now, I was lucky in that regard, but I was also pretty vigilant. But the point of the matter is this: to take the enlightenment that happened in the 90s and say these medications are good for no one is just a travesty. But I'm going to tell you right now, we're sitting having this discussion. I don't see any rescue coming anytime soon. I don't see, the AMA June 16th, 2020 letter was a good thing, but we have got to take this further. And as far as tapering, which I know is the subject of this, you will see more and more and more of this. The more successes they have in taking doctors down, seizing their assets, and then dissuading the vast majority of them from prescribing because it's too risky, it may not even be a taper. It may be you go to the office for your October visit and it says, this clinic is now closed.
Right.
Janelle,
That's what I foresee.
Oh, go ahead.
Janelle, can I say one thing? So I organize doctors a separate place from the rallies, and a lot of doctors have reached out to me and they believe that the crisis was caused by the 5th vital sign. Yeah. And I never know how to respond to a doctor, because if a doctor believes that, I can't help change their mind. But those same doctors are now pushing costly, unnecessary injections on their patients, or they've morphed into a recovery center and they're doling out Suboxone too much, in my opinion, or they're trying to sell their patient a brand new shiny $150,000 spinal stimulator. So those doctors who believe the opioid crisis was caused by the 5th vital sign, they too are profiting off the backs of both pain patients and addicts.
And what is that 5th vital sign, just to clarify?
Pain.
Okay.
Pain.
In other words, you got your blood pressure, pulse, and then pain. Does everybody know who was behind that?
No.
Who got that drop from the Joint Commission?
Who was it?
Probably.
Andrew Claudia, really?
Yeah.
You should have known.
So there's nothing wrong with the. This was I hate to be a conspiracy theorist, but this was an early plot by Dr. Kolodny to get rid of people on opiates, being that he believes everyone who takes them is addicted. So if you get off of them, you're no longer addicted. And that's what he believes. And he has been pushing that agenda. It's more what he believes deep down inside than anything else.
As a patient and advocate in this for many years, the way I see it is, so when the CDC guidelines came out, primary care physicians became scared. So all people that are in pain had to start going to pain management doctors. So now you have them grouped. Then I feel like what's happening is there's becoming less and less of them, either because they're being scared, their license will be taken away, or they're going to jail because of it all. And I feel like what's happening is they want us to eventually kind of all go into almost addiction rehab places because that's where their money is, and then also be on Suboxone and buprenorphine. That's somebody that is looking from the outside, or well, inside and outside in. I feel like that's what's going on. Does anybody see that?
No, yes, you're right. It's true.
It's become a 9-headed hydra.
Yeah.
It's hard to discuss it because it's just so, 9 heads. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to see, because I think I heard there's tens of millions of people on pain medications for pain, right? You're talking about 800,000 addicts, but then, many more times that just using these drugs for pain, right?
There's 10 million people taking them daily, but there's 96 million people getting opiate prescriptions every year.
Wow.
So you got 96 million people taking these drugs for, pain, what they've injured, fallen down or whatever, after surgery, blah, blah. So 96 million people take these medicines, and there's about 1 million addicted. So that's 1 in 100, so if you could become addicted to pain medicines, then there ought to be a lot more. Where are they? With all these high numbers, 96 million people, there's 250 million prescriptions, 96 million people. At least half the population should be out shooting up behind dumpsters. But there's no more than there was in 1920. So where's the failure in the logic? And that's where we have our friend Socrates. Yeah. Because Socrates taught us Western philosophy. What Western philosophy is the search for truth. Philosophical societies used to be about science, searching for the truth. So how do you search for the truth? Well, you just keep asking questions. So the CDC announced they got 40,000 people a year dying. What's the next question? If I said there's 3,200 people dying up there in Wyoming, what would be the next question? Who are they? So who are they? They are people dying in the streets. Mm-hmm. That's who they are.
Well, and not only that,
40,000 of them, and that's pretty horrible because that means we are not treating our addicts. They're all dying in this. Well, 40,000.
If something happened to me, though, and I passed away, I'm concerned that they would say it was either an overdose death because I'm on pain medication. That seems like their first thing that they go to. Because I had seizures starting in October, and my family called the EMTs to go to the emergency room because I never had one before. And they gave me 2 rounds of Narcan because they thought I was having an overdose. When I was in a seizure, they had my pain, my medicine and everything. Right. They counted it. They realized I didn't even take it that morning. And then the second time I had it, the ambulance guy shook the bottle and said, "Oops, it sounds like there's some missing. So she's definitely having an overdose." But they wouldn't allow them to give me Narcan this time. But it's a real shame how patients are treated.
It's pervasive. Yeah. We are at the bottom of the well. And it's going to be very, very difficult to reverse this. But if you don't try, it's not going to get reversed, So one of the things that I've got up here on my little telephone, where my entire world is, This is the AMA letter, and this is what it says about tapering. Before starting therapy, clinicians should establish treatment goals with all patients. As your pain better, including realistic goals for pain and function, should consider how therapy will be discontinued. That's what the CDC wrote. Determine how it's going to be discontinued. That was crossed out. And the AMA put in there adjusted, including the potential for tapering and or discontinuation. Now you got to kiss ass. If benefits do not outweigh the risks. So if somebody's having an allergic reaction, yeah, you taper it off. Clinicians should continue the opioid therapy only if there is a clinically meaningful, okay, it's working, the drug is working, continue. Achieving treatment goals for improving and maintaining levels. This is all indicative that people are afraid of this drug. These drugs are no different than any other FDA drug. They have warnings on 600 drugs. There's 600 drugs with warnings. But it's all this kind of apologetic language that I find interesting. This could be said in a couple of words. You treat like Dr. Feldman said, you treat like any other medicine. Here's the side effects. Be careful. Let me know how it works. If it doesn't work, we'll taper you off.
On tapering, the CDC also stated if patients on high opioid doses are unable to taper despite worsening pain and or function with opioids, whether or not opioid use disorder criteria are met, consider transition to buprenorphine.
Good Lord.
Why would they suggest that?
This is by the way,
that's on their website.
Yeah, there's a 10th Amendment, and it says the federal government cannot step into issues that the states take. And guess what? The practice of medicine is at the state level.
Right.
I'm licensed.
Wait. Let me chime in there. Hey, do you think that the state is on your side?
No.
It doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do with jurisdiction.
It has everything to do with it. Let me tell you what happened. I've been doing this longer than anybody in this room, okay? And I'm going to tell you this. I've had DEA agents in my office. We're talking about 5 years ago. And they said, well, we're just here for a routine inspection. And I said, well, get the hell out of here because you don't have a fucking warrant. Right? Because I'm a firm believer that, what's mine is mine and it doesn't belong to the government. But that has changed. So I can tell you about a doctor in Hattiesburg, Mississippi that had the same thing happen to him, except 18 of them came in with machine guns and laser pointers and they put it to his head and forced him on the floor. So what I'm saying to you is a meeting happened. I don't know where it happened and I don't know who was there, but they decided that doctors are expendable and we are going to get the bulk of the money that goes to opiates and we're going to transfer it to other places.
That's
and
right.
One of those places is the buprenorphine manufacturers. And I mean, can you think of another guideline which recommends a proprietary drug that a doctor must use? Now, it's like saying, if a patient is not doing well on diet modification, we should put them on Lilly brand insulin only. That's the equivalent of what
will you explain that? What's the buprenorphine?
That is a more modern methadone, for those that are not. So it's a medication-assisted treatment. It's an opiate substitute that once you get on it, you're essentially on it for life. So think about this. You're the manufacturer, and we take 96 million Americans that Dr. Klein told us about a minute ago. We put them all on a drug manufacturer's drug that they're going to be on a monthly prescription for the rest of their lives. Do the math. It's billions and billions and billions of dollars. Right. So what did I say earlier? We're going to take the money that the Purdue family made, and we're going to take it. And the vehicle is going to be these patients.
Let me ask something. Because the
ahead,
FDA is the only place that should be able to say anything about these medications. Why have they not spoken up? Why have they not said anything? Like the AMA. I don't
asked some insiders in Washington. It's kind of like you don't yell at your neighbor's dog.
Yeah.
In other words, agencies never criticize other agencies. They feel that that's the job of the boss, who's the president. It's kind of like you got a bunch of children, and the children are all saying, yeah, look what he's doing. No, you can't do that. But I can tell you that the FDA is on our side, and we have been offered that if we send in basically adverse drug reaction reports, which would be a report because people are tapered, they'll count them. So we're going to have an estimate of the number of people. We have 3 studies to show that about 75% of people have been cut off. We know there's 10 million. Do the math. And also, one of the things we're going to try to do with this 12-page document is to make a copy of the highlighted sections, like the one we just read. And then we're going to put it on our new website. We're trying to form a new organization called the National Pain Council. As soon as it gets through the North Carolina LLC's certification. And it's going to be, people can join it as affiliates, they can join as members. There's no fees. It's basically a way to get everybody together. So one of the things that we're going to offer on the website is we're going to make a copy of the 12-page letter, and we're going to highlight sections and make it so it comes through when you print it. And then people can make copies of those, and they can send them to their doctors. And a little trick, having run an office, if you get something in the mail, you're going to put it in the chart. If I hand somebody a document when I'm in there visiting, they can just throw it in the garbage. So the trick is to get everybody to, and it saves face too. Doctors get 8 minutes and you're handing them this 12-page letter. But if you do that, they'll actually read it privately when they're not in front of you, losing face. So we're going to try to do that. We're going to try to actually do some things. Right now, the biggest thing we have is this AMA 12-page letter, because it just says it. And one of our members, Jen Bartel, has made a little synopsis of all the quotes. If you want to attack something, you use other people's language. Then they can't say a word. Andrew Kolodny and Thomas Frieden, who was running the CDC, made the same statements to the press independently.
Yeah.
Pain
like
pills are heroin pills.
Exactly.
So right away, that's just what they said. You don't have to say these are bad boys or they're in bed together or they're, trying to pull some scam where everybody's going to make a lot of money. You just say that. Let people decide for themselves. So, this tapering thing is very, very malicious and pernicious. One of the things that we never do in medicine is undertreat people. That's always negligent. If a person needs 10 radiation treatments, for their cancer, and I say, well, you only need 4, that's undertreatment. If I don't want to give a whole lot of insulin, so the person's blood sugar is 900 all the time, that's undertreatment, and that's something that you can send to the board. Our board in North Carolina has made it very clear that doctors who are undertreating are going to end up appearing before the board. There's a case up in New Hampshire. Some doctor was just fined. So we need more of those. So we're advising our patients to go online. These medical societies are in the complaints. That's how they start processes against doctors. They take complaints and investigate them. And so if you put a complaint in that you're being undertreated for any disease, they're going to look at it. So if people are following the CDC guideline, it doesn't matter at the state level, because you're undertreating people. Plus, believe it or not, if you read the 50-page CDC guideline, which I've attempted to do, it is so dense. I don't think there's anybody on this planet that's actually going through it, and I'm still working on it. It never actually says 90 milligrams for chronic patients. All it says is, if you're going over 90 milligrams, be careful. So it's not actually in there. They also they say they do not recommend tapering, but if you do a word search on the CDC guidelines, the word taper is in there 42 times. In my Goodman and Gilman book on pharmacology, it's in there once. So you can see right through all the smokescreen, and they have definitely been trying to get people, and Andrew Kolodny and Dr. Lemke at Stanford both made public statements that said people should be forced off their opiates. Never in the history of the United States have we ever had a medicine that people were forced off. Yes, there are medicines the FDA pulls, but you're not forced off. You just, your doctor tells you, look, this is bad stuff. Just kind of, don't take it anymore, taper it down, but not forced off. I mean, that's horrible.
I have some questions about because the CDC guidelines are going to be revamped in 2021. I know Dr. Beth Darnell, she's a Stanford pain psychologist. I believe she's one of the stockholders or people on the board. I believe Kate Nicholson, and there's a bunch of others. But she calls forced tapering a large-scale social and medical experiment being conducted without sufficient evidence on how to do it the right way. Do you agree with this statement? Is there a right way or reason to even be tapering patients? And do you think like the 2021 guidelines are going to help patients at all or make it more clear for doctors?
You said something, okay, that I think you must distinguish. This is very important up front. And it goes to your philosophy of humanity. There's not a patient that I couldn't get off of pain medication if I worked hard enough at it. There wasn't one. They might have objected. They might have felt terrible. So you must ask yourself the following question. Is somebody in pain worth treating? And if you can't answer that question yes or no, then those people could give a rat's ass about how you taper patients. And so the point of the matter is this: is forced tapering appropriate? Well, it's appropriate under, three instances. Number one, the medication is having significant side effects. Number two, the medication is being diverted to the street. Or number three, the patient can't follow directions. Those are some reasons to force taper somebody. But to force taper somebody that's doing well, is that ever indicated? Only with the consent of the patient. But then I said there's other forces here. It's not just Dr. Klein and me and the patients. There's DEA agents, and there's Justice Department, and there's FBI, and there's medical boards, and there's Internal Revenue Service, and there's state attorney generals filing lawsuits. There's all these outside factors that come to bear on should we force taper a patient.
In my medical practice, when people are on long-term medications, I suggest that they, on their own, taper them once a year. For example, high blood pressure medicine, you can taper it once a year. And they found out that 15%, not huge, but 15% of people didn't need it anymore. So I tell patients on their pain medicines to, on your own, taper down and make sure you still need this much, or make sure you need it at all. We did a poll at JATH, J-A-T-H, our educational consortium, and we asked people about tapering and how it appears about 10% of people are on opiates who don't need them. So there is a reason to taper, but it doesn't need to be forced. You can just tell people to give it a try. And if their pain returns, then they need that particular dose. Also, it rules out hyperalgesia, which I don't think exists. But if you drop the medicine and your pain improves, you have hyperalgesia. So, but people ought to do that on their own. And
what is the correct way to taper a patient? Like, how do you do that?
Well, the CDC suggests 10% a week minimum, or 10% a month. And, pharmacists are cutting people off and violating that right and left. That's just negligence. I mean, you take somebody suddenly off, they can die. And they're being taken off their benzodiazepines. So tapering is not just saying you're not going to get any more. That's about 10%. It should be at minimum of 10% a week.
Claudia, because we deal with patients and we're patients, how have patients been tapered, or what have they told you? Like, how is it done?
Janelle, a man had his hand amputated yesterday, and they were sending him home with no pain medication. And that was the first call of the day. So this is where we are. And whenever Dr. Feldman and I get on the phone with the patient, they're usually crying. There hasn't been, a lot of people weren't tapered. I think people were only tapered after the FDA put out that clarification. Oh, by the way, make sure you taper your patient because they could blow their head off, but it's not our, it's not our fault. So we're now advocating for people who are having limbs chopped off. And I spoke with, I accompanied somebody to their pain management visit, and this very young, sweet nurse practitioner, she said, we're in the middle of an opioid crisis. And I looked at her, and, I have to keep the peace when I'm in the room with a patient and a doctor. And I said, yes, dear, we are definitely in the middle of a crisis. But in the state of Rhode Island, guess how many people overdosed in 2019 on prescription medication prescribed to that individual? 0. Not one person in my state of Rhode Island overdosed on pain medication. It's actually hard. It's actually hard to find people who have overdosed on prescription pain medication. Now, when we add some illicit, some heroin and cocaine and fentanyl, well, now we've got a party and we have a successful overdose. So by the time patients come to us, they're distraught. They've already been cut off of their pain medication. They're on over 100 morphine equipped MMEs daily, and their doctor's like, well, I'm going to take you down to 30. And that's not a slow taper. I don't like the word taper unless it's used for, when I've got Crohn's disease, I would be tapered off of my prednisone, but a forced taper with opioids with no consent, that's not a taper. That's an attack.
Well, what do patients go through mentally and physically when they are being tapered? You kind of touched on it.
Oh, it's a constant. The life of a pain patient every 4 weeks consists of the following. You white knuckle it, driving like this to your pain management visit, wondering, is today the day that I'm cut off? Now, Andrew Kolodny and the others from PROP would say, well, that behavior is indicative of an addict. That behavior is not indicative of an addict. That behavior is indicative of a person who's been suffering for a very long time with pain, and is today the day that I lose my medication. And after they leave there, if their doctor's still their doctor, when you drive to the pharmacy, that's when, you're in for a real treat, because that's where you'll be wholeheartedly discriminated by the pharmacist. And if you're fortunate enough to have a pharmacist fill your script, chances are they're going to tamper with the script. They're going to lower the dose because they too have been terrorized by the DEA. But if you're able to maintain your doctor, find a pharmacy who's willing to fill your script, chances are Blue Cross, United Health, they're not going to cover it. This was a well thought out plan. Yeah, this was a well thought out plan. They covered all their bases. And Dr. Feldman said this. There was a meeting, and there's not a lot of people involved. I call this the greatest Ponzi scheme of all time, because there's not a lot of people, maybe 200 people. It's the same 200 people, and they're making a fortune profiting off of these poor people. I mean, I shouldn't be getting called in for a person who had their hand removed, and I shouldn't be called in for a woman who had her breast removed. So it's bad. We have officially bottomed out as a country. But what's really offensive to me is when a doctor said, well, no, I don't believe in prescribing opioids for pain, but I'm happy to prescribe you Suboxone. Suboxone. That's really? What about, and we're going to see a lot of class action lawsuits because people are losing their teeth from Belbuca, from Suboxone. It goes in the mouth and it's rotting the teeth out. And I am happy to spearhead any lawsuit because these people should be held accountable. So Indivior is guilty of what J&J was convicted of doing. Indivior just took their place. We just swapped seats, and now Indivior is rolling in the money, and nobody ever discusses the largest opioid settlement in history, and that's Indivior. Nobody cares because it doesn't go along with the false narrative. What the media has done, they've caused irreparable harm. They have plagued, they have polluted the country into believing we're in the middle of an opioid crisis, because believe it or not, I get phone calls from people telling me my mom doesn't want to take her pain medication because she doesn't want to get addicted. So, I said, well, look at it this way. How many people in your family have had surgery, and how many have had opiates, and how many are now IV heroin users? Look at it that way. Well, no one. Okay, chances are your grandmother, your mother, your father, your cousin, they're not going to get addicted. But the media has caused irreparable harm. But the media, Prop, Shatterproof, Pacera Pharmaceuticals, Rockmore Hope, Narcs Apris, they've all, the DEA, the DOJ, they all work in tandem, and they're all making money off the backs. And I'm going to say this too, because this is daring. This country has no interest in helping addiction. This country has one goal: maintaining addiction, because when you go on Suboxone, you ain't coming off of that drug. And I call those lifers. You're on that for life, because watching a person get off Suboxone is just as bad as watching an alcoholic go through withdrawals. It is painful, and it's not happening. And we're living in a country with walking antidepressed Suboxonites. Here, have some Suboxone. Where's the oversight for the Suboxone?
That's right.
Dr.
Dr. Klein and I actually a few years ago were joking around that, we'll just buy a house and we'll make it for people that have addiction, because there's no rules. Dr. Klein, do you want to talk more about it? Because I know you know a lot more.
Yeah, when a judge sends somebody off to 90 days of rehab, rehab costs $1,000 a day. Big business.
A lot of money.
And none of the rehabs are certified or licensed. They do whatever they want. Nice business. $1,000 a day, do whatever you want. We had an outfit here in North Carolina that was renting out their heroin addicts to a nursing home, and they were cleaning up and stuff, and the nursing home was paying these people, for these slaves. And so the Department of Public Health here rushed over there and investigated, and they said, oh, crap, we don't have any regulations. Do whatever you want.
Well,
9-headed Hydra.
Right. I mean, I'd like to just clarify so there's all this financial incentive. The financial incentive is basically in the rehab business, because people are giving sort of these morphine substitutes like Suboxone. So that's big money, and these rehab places are big money. So the more they can fabricate and frighten people about this whole addiction thing, and say that anybody that is taking an opioid daily will become an addict or is an addict, the more that they can sort of almost fabricate this rehab industry that then is making these people extremely wealthy. Is that the gist of it?
That's the gist of it. And you know that these organizations that organize the rehab also support the police department.
Right.
Because they're the ones out there rounding up the business for them at $1,000 a day. Yeah, the whole rehab business. I talked to some addicts, which nobody ever does. And I said, what's kind of the ideal place? And he said, well, first of all, you got to have addicts running it. And he said, two, there needs to be choice of different kinds of programs. You can use MAT, medication-assisted treatment. You don't have to. You can use other things. You use prayer. You can use getting beat up. You can use kindness. There's all kinds of approaches. And if you had a licensed rehab facility, they should be offered all those. And then they should be responsible for if they're going to give them medicine, they should be responsible for at least 1 year, making sure they get it, because they leave and they can't afford the $400 a month for some Suboxone, so they stop taking it, and then they shoot heroin and die.
Well, that's my second question on all of this, is that when somebody gets forced tapered, well, what are the odds that they're just going to go to the street to get the rest of what they need? And then,
well, that's a very high probability, and the street is kind of learning that. They're now putting on ties and stuff, and they're selling. they're selling the pills for $30 a piece. I do know one patient who was in business. She had a rare painful disease. She went 10 years without treatment, and finally had surgery and got it fixed. But they mortgaged their home and business to go to the streets and buy Suboxone, not Suboxone, oxycodone.
Right.
I also know people that are growing their own poppies in their house and
Sure. Wow.
to be able to use.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of different things that are going on,
Huh.
and what patients are being forced to do because they just want to be able to be out of pain, to be able to eat, sleep, and just be normal, if whatever normal is. But
yeah, it's a reasonable thing to want.
Right.
That's why everybody goes to doctors and therapists. I mean, kind of rather be normal.
And then I guess
sorry.
Well,
I wanted to say, I'm sorry.
I think you can even add to this if you finish my question, because you'd mentioned it before, and then say what you'd like to say as well. But when you do hit the street, of course, that's when you're going to get fentanyl laced product, and that's when the overdose. Because you mentioned, Claudia, nobody's overdosing from pills that they're using that are prescribed by the doctor. This is a pretty safe way of dealing with pain management. But when, say, you're force tapered, maybe you're cut off, maybe you're cut in half right away, and you're gonna go through some kind of detox if you don't. So you hit the street, and the next thing you know, you get some kind of dirty drug. That's when the overdoses happen, right? I mean, this is
overdoses. Actually, no one overdoses from the narcotic. No, that's kind of an astounding thing to say. It's always multi-drug.
Yeah, polymorphine.
We're kind of looking in that right now, that if you're only like a prescription opiate and nothing else, like Claudia said, you're probably not going to have any deaths. We're only estimating 500 deaths a year in the United States from just prescription opiates. All the people dying are on the street. Somebody needs to ask the CDC about that. Everybody's dying on the street, and so why are they dying on the street? Because they're getting illegal drugs. Why are they getting illegal drugs? Because we are not giving them treatment.
Right.
Because we don't want to give dope to dopers.
The 800,000 of them.
Well, Jonelle, I wanted to say I advocated for a person with addiction, because we have started to do that. And this man, he was very honest, because sometimes addicts aren't so honest. And he was honest. He says, I get my Suboxone and I use on alternating days. He's like, I shoot up. I use heroin, but the Suboxone helps me, not get sick.
Well, and because he's just trying not to be sick anymore, right? They're not looking to be high at that point.
Well, nobody wants to be dope sick. It's a miserable existence, I would imagine. But I said, correct me if I'm wrong. I said, you get to go, and he walks right in treatment whenever he needs to. And here's my other problem with Suboxone, the script writers of Suboxone. There's no therapy. And Matt is only successful with a plan. And it's not, here's your script, have a great day. And, doctors need to be Suboxone certified, but there's scripts. These scripts go out left and right. Suboxone is one of the most diverted medications there is. And Andrew Kolodny said, I don't care if it's diverted. It's a wonderful drug. We have a quote. We actually have a YouTube video of him and prop members saying buprenorphine only for pain. And that's their goal. For acute pain, for chronic pain, you only get buprenorphine. Why is
Suboxone? Suboxone's the number one traded drug in prisons right now, too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's number one drug on the street, because what a lot of people don't know about heroin that's different than pain patients is when you're due for your next dose of heroin, you're already deep into withdrawal. You withdraw between doses. And, if somebody's on oxycodone and it's, 4 hours and it goes to 6 hours, you're going to get a little pain and you're going to get a little nudgy, but you're not going to drop into some horrible withdrawal. And that's why heroin addicts don't like heroin. They really don't. If they could get their hands on some OxyContin, as one heroin addict I talked to did, he and his buddy went out and paid for OxyContin, but it was $240 a day, and they liked it, and they would rather do that. But the heroin's $50 a day.
Hmm.
So, and these people don't have sources of income. Yeah, they steal and stuff like that, but it's pretty hard to have a decent income, stealing stuff from stores.
Well,
So we need to learn more we need to clean up the addiction problem first. And a lot of people with pain don't like that, but they're hooked together.
Something with tapering also that nobody's talking about is the other side of once you go through your withdrawal, because you're going to go through minor withdrawals even if you taper down. But once you're past that, we all still have pain. We still have our
Right.
rare, painful, horrible diseases that we're living with the rest of our lives. What are we supposed to do?
Where does the pain go? I always said that. Where does the pain go when you're tapered? Does the pain mysteriously disappear? It's so I just think it's such an insult. It's insulting, and it's the attack on women with pain. Right, Dr. Feldman? Maybe we advocate for 30%, but 70% of the people we advocate for are women. And I feel like we're, the attack on the woman, and, we pain catastrophize. Well, what happens to our pain once we stop on medication? If I stopped my Remicade and my methotrexate, I would get very sick, and I would probably have to have another colostomy bag. But what happens to your CRPS pain after you've been tapered? Does your pain diminish like Anna Lemke suggested it would, because your receptors need to get back into check? I mean, that's the silliest thing I've ever heard of in my life. And I'm not a doctor, but I know pain doesn't magically disappear. Doctors have, bought into the opioid-induced hyperalgesia. And for a long time, I couldn't say it without laughing, because I said, what is that? Because we've not advocated. I've yet to receive the phone call. Claudia, Dr. Feldman, can you help me? My opioids are making my pain worse. Never even had that phone call. It's lunacy. There's no such thing. But you get a whole bunch of psychiatrists together, and they're going to really discuss opioid-induced hyperalgesia. There's no such thing. Follow the money. It's money, money, money. Take out the doctor, leave the patient as collateral damage, turn all the pain management centers into recovery centers, and now we're going to make a whole lot of money. Forget about Purdue. Oh, no. Purdue, they're going to milk them. Who else is there left to attack? We've attacked the doctor. We've attacked the patient. We've attacked the pharmacist.
Insurance companies.
We've cut down opioid manufacturing.
Distributors. When you take 30 million people, when you target a large population with malice, and your goal is to erase them off of planet Earth, that's called a genocide. And we are in a pain patient genocide. Well, and Kolodny basically said that. He said, we're going to have to wait till this generation dies off. I mean, that's terrible. Oh, and what did he say about Black people, Claudia? I know it drove you nuts.
In 2017, in an NPR article, Andrew Kolodny said, well, we've actually done the Black community a favor. We've actually spared them addiction by not giving them the medication they need. And, Andrew Kolodny is of the mindset that Black people's pain isn't as severe as the white person. He is a disgusting, vile, bigot, racist. He hates everybody except the makers of buprenorphine. That's what it boils down to. And Brandeis continues to keep him on staff. We're living in systemic racism. Brandeis doesn't care. You know why? Because Brandeis, Kolodny is their cash cow. There's millions of dollars being funneled through Brandeis. They don't, but we're protesting. We have the Kolodny Kills rally set up for Monday right outside of Brandeis.
Folks, I've got to leave in about 2 minutes. So
okay. Well, I just wanted to ask you, Dr. Klein, quickly. Could you just please talk to us a little bit about JATH and National Pain Council?
Yeah, we formed a little group called JATH, Educational Consortium, and it's a group of volunteers, and we all try to tell the truth, find facts, tell the truth. And then some folks suggested that we need a national pain organization, which I support. And so we got the name National Pain Council. And so a lot of people are working on that. I'm going to become a member with JAF. And the idea is to get as many groups as possible under this umbrella. And then the groups can use it like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. The groups can say, hey, I'm part of National Pain Council. What the Pain Council would actually do is very little. If it came to try and get some legislation passed, then the Pain Council could go to Washington. You can't go to Washington unless you have a national organization, period.
Right.
And then we could hire lobbyists, $30,000 a month. If you want legislation, you have to pay for it. That's the way it works. And so we do have a bead on a lawyer who can find us. So, if you had 100,000 people, there's 6 million people being screwed, so everybody chipped in $5. We'd have enough maybe to get through 3 or 4 months of hiring a lobbyist.
Yep.
So,
And,
yep.
The National Pain Council website will be up shortly too, so you'll be able to go to it. I believe it's going to be nationalpaincouncil.org when it's ready.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thank you, Dr. Klein.
Good evening.
Yep. Thanks for coming on.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Claudia and Dr. Feldman, first of all, did you guys want to say anything else before I wanted to ask you a little bit about, your rallies and the GoFundMes, but did you have anything else you wanted to say before we started that about tapers or anything else we discussed?
I don't.
Guys, it's raining so hard where I am. I can.
Wow.
I can hear the rain.
I can finish up for Dr. Feldman.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right. Claudia, could you please tell us a little bit about Don't Punish Pain rallies? I know October 7th and some of them are other dates. Ours is October 8th for North Carolina. Could you explain a little bit about what's going on with that?
Sure. So I organize these rallies every 3 or 4 months for pain patients to get out there, to be seen, to be heard, to speak with the media. And this will be my last rally I'm organizing because we will have a presence in Washington, the Doctor-Patient Forum, the Don't Punish Pain rally, effective 2021. So this rally, we were canceled in March because of COVID. So I'm hoping that this rally will be a success. The CDC guidelines are being rewritten next year, 2021. I interviewed Beth Darnell. We discussed this. But I actually have fears that the guidelines could be rewritten more stringently. Yep. And I found with a movement, it takes thousands and thousands of people. And I started with 3 members. I have over 15,000. I'm on all social media platforms. And you have to get out there and you have to be visible. And, I preach this to the pain community and, they say, well, I'm in pain. I can't, but you have to do it for 1 hour. You just have to do it. And I sound like the Nike commercial. There's no easy way because this is a bipartisan issue. Everybody hates opioids. And it's up to the reason I got involved with this is because I hated how people like PROP, that organization, how they embellished about what a pain sufferer looks like. And, they use the term lazy, malingering, pain-seeking. And I said, I'm a lot of things, but I ain't lazy. So I tell people this is the face of a person who, when I need opioids, I take opioids and I keep it moving. But I train 7 days a week at a gym. I compete in fitness shows. I'm an author. I'm a retired court reporter and I'm a mama. So I'm a lot of things, but I ain't lazy. And the fact that these people, these venomous individuals, put this face on the look of a pain patient was appalling to me. And that's why I created the rallies. So people get out there and protest. How do you do it? It's very simple. Visit don'tpunishpainrally.com. Click on the rallies chart, find out where your rally is, and get out there. And we're all sick. We're all hurting. But this has to be done because out of all the causes in the world, this is the very last cause that people are willing to fight for. And doctors really weren't born to fight. Doctors were born to heal and to help. So the burden falls on the shoulders of the patients to to fight for the doctors, to fight for the patients, to fight for justice. So don'tpunishpainrally.com. We protest all next week, different days, different states. And the Facebook page, you can join that Don't Punish Pain Rally. And it's my way of paying it forward. We don't get paid. I wanted to discuss the lawsuit because Dr. Feldman is in the middle of a storm.
Yep.
So about 18 months ago, Dr. Feldman and I started to get a lot of requests to advocate for people whose pharmacists wouldn't fill their scripts. And I was called in January to advocate for this woman, Edie, and she was in Florida. And the pharmacist was so rude to me. And she says, I am not filling this script. And I said, well, what is the reason? I don't feel comfortable filling it. Well, that's not a good enough reason. I need a reason. Well, she wouldn't fill it. So Dr. Feldman noticed that he was driving 100 miles each way to get his wife, Linda, who's also a chronic pain patient, couldn't find a pharmacy to fill the script. And Dr. Feldman's wife was told, when I first heard it, I said, this can't be right. They said, well, we'll fill your script, but you have to get some other things. Huh? What do you mean other things? You have to get some non-opioid scripts. What do you mean non-opioid scripts? I only need this script filled. Put it this way. It's like when your kid gets an ear infection and you've got to get the pink stuff. So you're like, oh, here you go, Mr. Pharmacist, Mrs. Pharmacist. I need my kids amoxicillin. Well, I can fill it, but you need to buy some candy. I don't want candy. Well, you need to buy Band-Aids. I don't need Band-Aids. How about some laxatives? I don't need laxatives. I need my medication. Nope, not doing it. It's a form of racketeering. So this is where we are. Dr. Feldman picks up the phone. He's a little like I am. He's Jewish. I'm Italian. Together we're a nice combination. He gets on the phone. Lawyers were reluctant. Oh, no. Guess what? Today, there's not one law firm. There's a class action lawsuit filed against CVS in Rhode Island, Walgreens out of California, and I believe Costco. And we're waiting. The class has not been approved, but it's just the beginning. The floodgates will open if this class gets certified by the judge. And I think this will put the issue on the map. And you'll see me tweet, this country only responds to litigation. Litigation they shall have. So I said, Dr. Feldman said, you know what? And he said this from the day one when I first started when we first started working. He said, Andrew Kolodny needs to be held accountable. He's the thought leader behind this. And this goes back to 2005. So Dr. Feldman, a few weeks ago, created a GoFundMe because lawyers are costly. And we've raised $10,000 with the GoFundMe. We've got $90,000 to go because a reasonable lawyer probably wants a $100,000 retainer. And we're suing Andrew Kolodny and others for their part in the pain patient genocide. And just like other doctors have been sued before for being thought leaders behind the opioid crisis, these people need to be sued for what they've done. The pain patient genocide is a much greater issue than the opioid crisis, much greater. And that we have something that nobody else has, no other cause has. We've got the numbers. We've got 30 million people. So the GoFundMe is all over social media. You can find it on the Don't Punish Pain Rally page, on my Twitter at Merandi. We've got that, and we've already had a few successful meetings with law firms who are interested. Lawyers are now ready to hear because lawyers have been affected. Lawmakers have been affected. I get phone calls from my lawmakers. Oh, my mom can't get her script filled. Why do you think she can't get her script filled? Because you, in your infinite wisdom, passed a really bad bill one Wednesday night. So
that's right. But they don't seem to notice it until something like that happens. They just don't get it.
Oh, no. And one of my very first interviews, this man, and he's in recovery, and he's a senator. He said, let me tell you, Claudia, it doesn't matter until it happens to them. And I really, I'm not patient, but I knew with my legislation, I knew I needed to be patient. I knew I needed to wait, as sick as it sounds, for someone to get screwed over like the rest of the people are. So they're being screwed over, and now they want justice. And I think this Kolodny lawsuit will, Dr. Feldman has said it, there's three ways this lawsuit can go. It can get dismissed, we can win, we can lose. but he still has to respond. He's got to go in his wallet, and that's what we want to hit them in their wallet.
That's
Now
great.
you're going to pay for your legal.
Can I say something?
Of course.
No society that starts treating their citizens like we're treating the pain community will survive for long. This is the end of America. This when your mother becomes disposable, when you can put a knife on somebody and send them out of the hospital with no care, no pain medicine, and no thought. That's the problem. When you make your doctors operate on people and prescribe no pain medicine, like Joseph Mengele in Nazi Germany, we are in a state that I, in my 65 years, have never seen this society. And I went through the Vietnam War, and I saw all that horrible shit going on, and protests and this and that. But you see, in the 80s, everybody took a job working on Wall Street, and everybody just started getting interested in personal gain and no sacrifice. Well, I have never been that way. But, what Dr. Klein, I think, has missed is that no licensed doctor will put his or her name on anything for fear of retribution.
That's
you
right.
Understand that? Because the medical boards are puppets of the DEA. And until the AMA does more than write a letter, but that letter was a great advance. But remember, AMA changes officers every year. And we have got to keep this, we have got to keep their interest. And so what I say is this, is that, a lawyer told me a long time ago, you ever hear the saying, save your money for a rainy day? You ever heard that? Your mama told you that? Guess what? Yeah. It's raining. Cats and dogs. So bottom line is, the three of us here, and Doug too, and Dr. Klein, we're Johnny Alarm. Now we have got to get some plans, and I got news for you. Shaking hands and agreeing is not going to happen. They're only going to accept this when we ram it down their throats, like they rammed those guidelines down the throats of 30 million or more suffering people. So that's what I have to say. And everybody's, Arnold, nothing. Any one of us can become a chronic pain patient at any time.
That's right.
And you know that.
Yeah.
Well, within the last hour, we tried to summarize the last how many years of patient harms due to tapers and forced tapers. And unfortunately, despite all the info we covered, we really haven't even scratched the surface of the devastation caused by these tapers. And it's not just to patients, it's to doctors, it's just across the board. And like the dangerous narrative that has infiltrated the media and the public. And that's why it's important to go to Don't Punish Pain rallies, join the National Pain Council, give money to the GoFundMes. Even if you give $1, $5, if all of us did that, it will add up. But we all need to do our part in helping this community, because if we don't, nothing will change.
Well, listen, God bless you for doing this. Claudia works like a Trojan. Doug, thank you. Dr. Klein. I have been a bit of a casualty in this war, but I can't just wave my own flag. This is a flag of many people, millions, and so that's my new job, is taking care of millions of people. That's how I look at the rest of my life. So anyway, that's a Louisiana senator calling me. So maybe we'll get something done.
Yeah,
I doubt it, but maybe. So I'm gonna, if you don't mind.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Feldman.
Thank you, Jonelle.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Doug.
Well, all right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. That was the 19th Roundtable discussion produced by Transparent Media Truth. A great conversation between myself, Jonelle Elgaway, Claudia Merandi, and Drs. Arnold, Feldman, and Thomas Klein about what's going on in terms of this tapers crisis, this forced tapering that's happening to a lot of pain management patients around the country. According to the numbers that Dr. Klein was giving out, 100 million people are prescribed pain medications in the United States, 30 to 40 million of which may be chronic pain sufferers. That's a lot of people that are being affected by this crisis. The CDC is coming out with these recommendations of very low doses, and doctors are being sort of pushed by the establishment to not prescribe as much pain medication as many of these long-term patients really need. So the blowback from the drug war is severe for a very large portion of Americans, and it's a story that you're certainly not hearing anything about on the mainstream media. So thanks for listening to this. A lot of places to find information. And they're working on setting up this National Pain Council so that there can be a more organized coalition to push back against what the CDC and the DEA and these other governmental organizations are doing in terms of cracking down on people who are pain sufferers. These people aren't drug addicts, like Dr. Klein mentioned. The number of heroin addicts in the population has maintained itself at 4% since 1920. There doesn't seem to be a lot of difference going on over the course of time, and certainly the drug war has done nothing to reduce that number. So, what we're looking at is not a problem because there are more people who are in pain and who need these medications in order to assuage that pain, and there's no real reason for these national organizations and agencies to be coming down so hard on such a large percentage of our population, 30 to 40 million people, more than 10% of the population there, who require these medications for health purposes. So hope you paid attention to the information that you were given there. This conversation that's not being had on the national level does remind me of so much of what the roundtable discussions have been about. Just these issues that are coming up for me over and over again as I have these discussions about healthcare freedom, about the doctor-patient relationship, and about informed consent. I mean, these doctors that we're hearing from today in this conversation know their patients. They're not trying to funnel drugs to addicts. They're trying to make sure, and they're monitoring the patients to make sure they're not getting too much or too little of the drugs that they need. And this system of healthcare that we have in the United States right now is so controlled. The CDC, the American Medical Association, and then all the way down, so that the doctors don't really have a lot of leeway with how to treat each patient individually, and yet your doctor is the one who knows you the best. So just more and more, personally, I am becoming an advocate of really understanding the importance of the doctor-patient relationship, and that's a personal relationship between you and your physician. As long as your physician is educating you and doing their job well, there really should be no outside influence on the types of treatment that your doctor and you personally agree to engage in for your particular set of problems. Your doctor's the only one who knows you. So these regulations that apply to everyone across the board, they don't really apply to anyone. And this is a problem with all kinds of things. We've talked about coronavirus, of course, quite a bit on this program, but lots of other healthcare issues where this is becoming a serious problem across the board. Doctors need to have freedom to make these choices for patients because those doctors are the only ones who knows your individual needs and your individual issues. So we just keep coming back to this. For this particular issue, this forced tapering issue, please think about finding out more. You can go to www.don'tpunishpainrally.com to find out more about what's going on with those rallies. Fairly soon here, and I wanted to tell people this, there is going to be a website put up, nationalpaincouncil.org. They haven't gotten it up as of this recording, but hopefully that'll be up soon so you can check and see if that's happening. Until then, you need to check out this email if you're looking for more information or if you're looking to donate to the cause, patientsunite14@gmail.com, and that is with a capital P and a capital U. So just to get that across one more time, capital P patients, capital U unite14@gmail.com, and they will respond to you with more information about what's going on right now in terms of getting this issue in front of the legislators in Washington, D.C., where it can actually be addressed. So I just want to remind everyone that my name is Doug McKenty. My show is The Shift with Doug McKenty. You can find out more on Facebook and YouTube at The Shift with Doug McKenty. Also on the web at www.theshiftnow.com, and I am on Twitter at dmckenty. And of course, I want to thank Rob Rubin and all the guys at Transparent Media Truth for helping to produce this episode. You can find Rob on Twitter at TransparentMed1. He's also on the web at transparentmediatruth.com, and of course the YouTube channel Transparent Media Truth. And just to reiterate one more time, we are counting on all of our listeners for helping to support this program and to actually distribute this program. We're not getting a lot of action from the third-party platforms given the content that we cover. So if you're listening to this, please think about at least liking, subscribing, and most definitely try to share this with others so that we can spread the word. All right. Thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for next week's episode. Looking forward to continuing to produce more episodes of the Roundtable discussions, and we'll be getting that one out to you next week. Okay, thanks again. Take care. The opinions and ideas expressed in this roundtable discussion do not necessarily reflect the views of Transparent Media Truth, but only those of the speakers participating in the discussion. Under the copyright disclaimer within Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976, allowances are made for fair use of public content for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use.